Good afternoon, everyone. Liubov Akulenko. I'm Executive Director of the Ukrainian Center for European Policy. And today we have a meeting. European requirements to driver's licenses, what Ukraine has to implement. So we have several reasons for holding this event. First, because Ukraine completes the ratification of the association agreement. It will happen at some point on the 30th of July in Kiev, and it will mean that it will be in force, and the European Union will monitor and ask us what we did and what we didn't. And before we didn't have this. And second is that the Ministry of Internal Affairs continue to improve procedure of issuance of driving license, and the ministry should adapt till the end of year the directive that regulates this issue. And third aspect why this issue is acute is the number of drivers in Ukraine. Before presentation, we discussed it with the speakers. We do not have official statistics, but we believe that it is about 10 million Ukrainians. So the issue of driving licenses and the changes that will be introduced, it all relates to a lot of people. That's why we decided to carry out a survey in order to understand what EU requires. And we invited representatives of state bodies who are responsible for this process in Ukraine. Before giving the floor to experts that created this report, I would like to say several words. In our survey, we focused on two directives. 126 and also Directive 59 about commercial transport drivers. So this approximation should be done simultaneously. That's why we invited the representatives of the Ministry of Infrastructure, because they are responsible for commercial transport. We analyzed two documents. The first, the plan of implementation of Directive 126 developed by the Ministry, and we analyzed the activity in the Ministry of Infrastructure, the draft law concerning automobile transport, and also we analyzed new draft law that was made public by the ministry on their site. And those things that we coordinated, we didn't focus on them. We focused in our research on those aspects we disagree, and we provided our recommendations how to improve, how to add more. So I would like to give the floor to the authors of this research, Svitlana Maistruk and Volodymyr Kaskovetskyi. I give the floor to Svitlana Maistruk. So you have up to 5 minutes. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I will briefly outline Directive 126. This is the third directive of the EU concerning driving license, and it replaced the directive that existed previously. And so we will use the new one. That's why we analyzed new directive. So what it envisages and why it was adopted. In the EU, they have a big problem because there are many different licenses. There were more than 110 driving licenses, and the EU citizens can travel around EU, and they decided to introduce a single standard in order that people could travel through EU countries, and about 60%, 300 million people had driving license. That's why it is clear that the licenses should be unified. Then to increase the safety and security of the document in one country, for example, the license was cancelled, the person went to another state and got licensed there, and they had several licenses at the same time. And there should be one license for one person. And also they introduced by this directive an overall system of data sharing. All countries should be connected to the system. So this is a database, unified information concerning driving licenses. So if a person in one country canceled this document, they were not able to get it in another country because all the information was available in the system. And one more important is that different categories of drivers. You know that a lot of people die in driving accidents. And in the EU, they carried out many research about the reasons. And there were two more vulnerable categories of drivers. First, young people who were motor drivers and those who are over 50 years of age. So they made some corrections about the categories of vehicles and the periods for medical tests, so medical examinations. What Ukraine should introduce? First, the term of licenses. Now they will licenses will be issued for 10 or 15 years. And why the stamps were introduced? In order to update information and to protect from fakes. So in Austria, Cypher, Finland, they have 15 years, and other countries 10 years. For the second group, they have 5 years, and also medical examinations for the first group of drivers, and this is the category A and B. In EU countries, they have simplified procedure of medical examinations, so they check the site of a person, of a general practitioner, carry out this examination in separate cases if there were some grave problems with health, so this person can be sent to specialized doctors. Second group, these are trucks, and about the system my colleague will tell you. And what Ukraine is not obliged to implement according to this directive. So in the agreement we had Directive 439, and they are absent in the new directive. That's why the replacement of driver's license, it doesn't require examination. So a person pass tests only once, and for second group, my colleague will tell you about it. Also, the norm about microchip is not obligatory. In Directive 439, it is said that the countries can introduce microchips on the driving license for better protection of data. Whether Ukraine needs it, this is a separate matter. If European countries are integrated in the electronic system, whether Ukraine be integrated to share data with between EU and Ukraine, this is still an open issue. About medical examination, I addressed this issue, but the main is a check of sight, and after 50 years they have more medical examinations. And if a country adopted decision that a person should take this medical test, depending on the age, they may introduce such a requirement. So this is briefly about this directive, and my colleague will continue about professional drivers. 1 second, please, in order to show how these directives differ. So 126 directive is not implemented in full, and about Directive 159 about commercial transport, we should implement it in full on commercial transport. So it should be introduced in full but I would like to state that this is a directive, not a regulation, and each country and we can follow our own way, but the main idea that is provided in this directive is that professional drivers that transport freights and passengers and provide transportation services, they should have another level of knowledge and they should confirm their professional qualification, because we understand that they have the highest responsibility because they transport people, and the safety of these people is really an important element in transportation, and also safety and security of freights, and this influences the safety on our roads on the whole. And this directive is connected with the Directive 126, and it relates to training and qualification of drivers. And here there is separate category. The categories D and subcategories that provide the transportation by vehicles such as buses and minivans, vans, and the 59th directive provide for increased training for drivers, and it envisages that more younger drivers, they should get involved in this profession and to increase standards in order that it was a professional driving, not just driving. And it provides the necessity to support the level of professionalism of drivers and to provide safety of transportation. The philosophy of this directive is like this. Professional driver should have professional special knowledge and practical skills that differ from that of a driver who has C or category D. And today in Ukraine, if you have a driving license, you can transport passengers and freight, but in Europe it is not possible because they introduced such a directive. And about the directive, it envisages that there should be an initial qualification. So a driver from the start should be trained. It can be a full course. It is 280 hours and accelerated course of training. It is half as this, and there are some limitations concerning age for accelerated course. And after initial qualification, each 5 years, professional driver should undergo training. In order to get new information about new characteristics and elements, about technical means to provide safety on roads, and this training should be obligatory. About tests, there are differences in initial and accelerated training. And periodic training, they do not have such a requirement. The country should establish whether they will have this test. So we analyzed legislation and draft law that is now made public by the Ministry of Infrastructure. It is based on a preliminary draft law 4683, and it introduces special training, but not all the aspects are included in this draft law. That's why we propose to focus the attention on such aspects, because draft law introduces periodic training once in 5 years, but there is no clear norm concerning preliminary qualification or about those drivers that have a driving license of C and D category, and the directive envisages that those who got these licenses, this is stated like preliminary qualification, initial qualification, and others should have this initial or accelerated course. So this should be reflected in the draft law, and also the transitional period until the introduction of such training and retraining, whether it is driver, bus or truck, and that this is envisaged by the directive, and there are norms concerning age limitations. And I would like to say that today's legislation differs, our national legislation differs from the requirements of the directives. That's why the minimum age limitations, they should be reviewed. And this is the aspect that is connected with the Directive 126. Two more aspects I would like to draw attention to. In the draft law, they should envisage the issue of the code on the as a code 95 of EU, and because this draft law only introduces the certificate of professional competence, but there should be a code according to the EU directive, or there should be a qualification card for the driver, and for non-residents also there can be a special certificate envisaged by the regulation 1072. And also one more important aspect are non-resident drivers who work for Ukrainian companies, and there should be clear requirement on their qualification. And the last aspect I wanted to draw your attention to is medical examination. For the second group, drivers of CD categories, it is envisaged to have this medical examination and full scope. This is a physiological examination, and all should be connected with the security of transportation of freights and passengers, and the term for this medical examination is connected with the term of renewal of the license. And concerning the age, it can be restricted, or it can these medical examinations should be made by specialists of medical sphere. Thank you for your attention. Using this opportunity, I would like to give the floor to Olha Stefanishyna to join us. And before giving the floor to Vladyslav Krykliy, I would like to say the only thing we didn't do when we carried out our research, we didn't address two bodies of power, because we had an aim to carry out independent research. And in this stage, I would be thankful to the representatives to say their opinion on this research, and how you, Vladyslav, are going to implement the Directive 126, and what is your opinion about those points we disagree with. So I would like to give you the floor now, because we have 6 months until this implementation. So each of the issues, we presented different models in our research, but now we should decide what models are best for Ukraine. Did you analyze different options? Do you see what model will be the best while adapting this directive in Ukraine? Thank you for the opportunity to speak. First, I would like to thank the Center of the European Integration Policy Center, and we spoke about these issues with our partners, and this periodic things that we should implement in the framework of implementing this directive. This is the issue, not because we have wish to see a person or to have this exam. This is the issue of the safety and control of health of people, because people on roads, they are responsible not only for their own safety, but also for safety and security of other people. And that's why I'm glad that here we have a representative of the Ministry of Healthcare, and I would like to say that it would be really painful for us as the body that is responsible for the implementation of directive on the spot. if we won't have proper registers, we should have them, and we should have proper data about medical examinations that were carried out. And in this respect, I believe we have a consent, and we had a meeting on this about the term of these documents, taking into account the response of the public. We believe that for non-professional category, for first category, these are 15 years, and for professionals, these are 5 years. And all this will be reviewed by the Supreme Council that will adopt the legislation on this. But we believe this should be like this. So the issue of a microchip, and Mr. Kaskovetskyi said that the directive, it provides recommendations, but we should hear those recommendations, and we start to think ahead. And we try to do more things electronically and to introduce IT technologies. So we plan to use these mini chips, and at the ministry, our service centers, they are equipped with the proper equipment, and we want to propose to the Supreme Council the option that include the opportunity to use this chip, and it will provide also the opportunity to information sharing and to prevent falsification of documents. And it creates also a lot of opportunities, because many countries of the EU, they have a driving license, not only for driving, but also they use it as an ID, and and it is introduced in different services and different departments, both in central bodies of executive power and in local governments. So we believe that this is one more way for identification of people, and this will be for the benefit of the communities. And also we have many meetings with the Ministry of Infrastructure. Unfortunately, we don't have the representative of the Ministry of Education here. I don't know what do you represent this ministry? No. And the matter is, there should be proper training of professional drivers. This is an important issue, because today we have an unpleasant situation when people, they get, for example, a truck or a bus for a personal use, and they can transport people. They can bring 30 or 40 passengers, and it creates a threat. And there is no such a case as anarchy in the European Union. So they have qualification, pre-qualification for drivers and examiners who hold these exams. And here these are abstract things for us, but we agree that we should implement European directives quickly. And not only, so we should start to fight the terrible statistics that we have on our roads, because there are accidents with big vehicles, and not only freights and enterprises suffer, but a lot of lives are lost. And we see the situation that there is a war on the roads, and it takes a lot of lives, even more than an anti-terror operation. And we are ready at the start of September to provide our drafts for consideration. There is a standard procedure at the committees, the discussions, and then comments from bodies of, and then there will be expert council that will provide additional recommendations. We will be glad. We are open for communication. We do not have problems in this. So, and about some discussive issues. So, I believe that we all understand and we agree on the matters that will be implemented. Thank you very much, Vladyslav. But I disagree with you because we do not agree with everything. I want to say why we disagree with a microchip. This system is created for the EU countries because they have unification, but we are not the EU state yet. And in the agreement, Directive 439 is mentioned, and Directive 126, it adds it, and we should not implement it in full. We start implementation with the paragraph 3, and we should not implement Article 1 on a microchip. And I don't remember the article, but in Directive 126, it is said that this is 10 or 11th paragraph on the microchip. So this is not obligatory. We believe that this is not an acute issue. So there should be a basis of driving licenses created. We lack the system. And also one more aspect I would like to say, that in the implementation plan, it is said that periodic there should be testing, and in the directive it is not said that A category drivers should undergo tests to verify their knowledge. So these are two arguments we disagree. Second category, we understand it in renewal. So you didn't see the last draft, but I want to hear your arguments. So you didn't hear this. So I didn't say about this examinations. We didn't propose to introduce examinations. And about the directive, and we supported that it is recommendations. And about the microchip, this is not obligatory, but we understand that we live in electronic age, and it will improve the security of the document, and it will help us to prevent these violations. And also now we work on the technology of the microchip in order to use it quickly to get information quicker in service centers, and also patrol police will be able to get the information quicker, not just to make a visual check. So this is a technology that is useful for the citizen and for the representatives of state bodies. And so we disagree only in one issue, and all other thoughts coincide on this issue. So I'd like to give the floor to Viktor Dovhan, who is the Deputy of Minister Infrastructure on European integration. Before giving the floor to him, I would like to remember your yesterday's post on Facebook about bikes, that you said that we should create a draft law and to introduce different initiatives concerning bikes, and this coincides with these two directives, because in Directive 126, the most vulnerable category are drivers of motorbikes, and increased age should be introduced, and also for driving big motorbikes, so 16, 7, and 18 years, not from 14. So your post is really accurate, and today we would like to hear from you. We saw that you work now in this area concerning commercial transport. And what is further development of this about automobile transport draft law that is still postponed, and What about your view and your opinion on the aspects we've mentioned? Thank you for following me on Facebook.
Before talking about this technical sense, 5 years, 15 years, two important factors were articulated. The fact that association agreement is in force and we should implement it, why, and what will happen if we do not implement it. It is important for us to talk not only about our commitments to the European community as a state. We also can get many benefits if we implement this association agreement, not only visa-free regime. We are talking at the top level, political top level, and Brussels hear us. We are talking about Marshall Plan of assistance to Ukraine. This is important for us because, first of all, we are expecting large investments into infrastructure, and as the colleague said, this is about security and safety on roads. Road safety was not priority. It was in the bottom place, but this is a dramatic question. Over 5,000 people die annually, and all of us see this communications, and they really these reports on road safety accidents seem like war losses informations. I would say we now have dramatic reform of road safety sector, implementation of some regulations of the EU, provision of socially important services, international movement of passengers, carrier of passengers and freights, decentralization, introduction of European conditions at workplaces on the market, motivation to implementation, very many changes. The problem is that over 2 years we have been trying to adopt this draft law. Now we have divided it into two parts. The first is access to the market. It is impossible. It is important for professionals. The second is technical requirements, complex sense. For a long time, I thought it should not be included, but fiscal services, they insisted that classification of road vehicles should be included into the bill. This is a scheme, and we can see here that at the bottom level we see high level of corruption of road traffic carriers. Changing the system, we would like to change bus transportation of passengers. Limitation on driving licenses to 5 years is a component of our commitments under the association agreement. Thank you, Mr. Victor. I would like to ask you about the issues mentioned by Volodymyr, that not in full the draft law which has been publicized on the website of the Ministry of Infrastructure, it is not completely in compliance with the directive. I would like to talk about the certificate of qualification. If Code 95 should be either stamped in driving licenses or it should be issued as a separate document. So this norm about document of professional qualification, of professional competence, this is a good comment. When I was working at the Ministry of Infrastructure, we have been finalizing this bill in order to get your expert comments and then to coordinate this draft law, and after all the comments I comparated, it would be submitted to the cabinet. Your comment is very important. It is logical and it will be incorporated. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Chorny, Director of the Center at the Ministry of Healthcare of Ukraine. I'd like to pay attention to the fact that when we were looking through two directives, we see that medical examination issues are available in both directives. And as Svitlana mentioned, why Directive 26 was developed, elderly people, they experience the highest damage. Commercial vehicle drivers as well as cars drivers, they should be examined more often. Ordinary drivers, they are not subject to some stringent medical examination requirements. We can see on the directive that this is a simplified system. Countries have different medical examination systems, but this one is simplified. And for commercial vehicles, medical examination would be more stringent. Will it be more stringent for persons, for individuals over 50 years old, and will you divide into these two categories the medical examinations by the type of vehicles? I would like to thank you for paying so much attention to medical examination in our country. In 2016, there were 2,000 road accidents, and we have 1,600 died persons and 43 injured persons, and 100,000 people requiring mental rehabilitation, and 80% of road accidents happened due to the human factor. We understand that today medical psychological condition, health condition is important, and it contributes to every drivers and pedestrians. We have different medical systems in Europe and in Ukraine, and as Ukraine goes to Europe and Europe has insurance, medical insurance system, every person in Europe annually go to medical institution and get its data included into electronic database. So when a person comes to medical institution and there is only an ophthalmologist, then this ophthalmologist issues a certificate to a person. So Ministry of Health now is on the way to medical insurances. We will get soon European model system of medical examination, which will allow us to have state or health state when we will be feeling healthy. Road safety medical examination should be the system should be in place, and what should be done for individuals. So Ministry of Health pay much attention and step by step plan. Upon we introduce medical insurance, in several years we will approach simplified system of medical examination. Today, no European country, no individual in Europe will go and buy somewhere medical certificate and try to get a driving license saying that this individual is healthy. I'm very thankful to the country's management, to our leaders, and today we, along with the Ministry of Interior, working on getting as soon as possible a single register of medical examinations and findings of medical examinations, so that we understand when any applicant comes, we should understand as Ministry of Health to issue certificates, to let certificates be issued to those individuals who can really drive cars. I think that we will prevent any opportunities to buy these medical examination certificates. Thank you very much. Directives say nothing, almost nothing about corruption, because this is our national problem. In Europe, nobody will even think to take money for issuing certificates. I think, as far as I understand, you want to use the model when a family doctor conducts such medical examinations if you are successful with the introduction of family medicine. I think that we have some years to understand what to do, how to do, and simplify. The opportunity to pass medical examination, I think that every person who will be subject to medical examination, I think we will then get healthy passengers, healthy drivers, and so on. analyzing different countries as concerns frequency of medical examinations. After 50 years of age, people are offered more frequent medical examinations. What do you think? Should we change this frequency? I think today we have that if a person is over 60 years old, medical examinations should be passed annually. This is because individuals do not go to clinics, to outpatient clinics to get medical examinations. So these medical examinations will give some understanding about health state of a person. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to Olga Stefanishyna, Director of Governmental Office on European and Euro-Atlantic Integration. She sees almost whole pictures on adaptation of European legislation. How do you plan to oversee the terms of implementation of adaptation of directives? I think that what is happening to driving licenses when competences of several governmental bodies are dubbing or adjacent. Thank you. I am the last to speak. Some part of my speech have already been spoken by other speakers. There is the intention of Ukraine to fulfill its commitments, and the competences of the ministries will be divided, will be allocated to each ministry. And as concerns driving licenses, we are already violating the terms of introduction of this legislation on driving licenses, because some time will be needed to adopt the law compliant with the two European directives which are mandatory for Ukraine according to the association agreement. And to comply with certain articles of the association agreement is one thing, but it is important to look into the system of proving qualifications of drivers, not from the side of individuals or businesses, but those centers, training centers for drivers. The sector is regulated on the governmental level. There is no Ministry of Education included into commitments, so implementation of the directive will place on them more work. So the work with all ministries in parallel takes 80% of time of those ministries and organizations. I think that the main work will start after the adoption of the legislation. We keep an eye on implementation of this issue. This commitment cannot be considered without adjacent commitments on transportation of passengers and freights. There are many questions to the Ministry of Infrastructure as concerns the issuance of licenses for transportation, and legislation legislative drafts at the end of September. There will be Euro Integration Day of Government for Transport to approve the bills in the transport sector, road safety and safety of passengers, under the commitments of Ukraine in the scope of association agreement. Specifics of our office is that we are the filter under the government. So legislative initiatives and governmental initiatives should be coordinated, and this is our responsibility to ensure such coordination. So on the day of adoption of transport legislation, our task is to oversee maximum compliance of Ukrainian laws to European legislation. And at the stage of implementation, there will also efforts will be put commitments on the implementation of the old directive. They are also a question. Lots of new legislation have already been implemented, but we still have our commitments, outdated commitments on the old directives. So ad hoc procedure was used when the ministry decides whether Ukraine is ready to implement new legislative acts of the EU, or we will implement only old acts. You can see that more progressive approach has been taken. The agreement binds us to implement separate commitments, but not the whole directive. I would not speak about the registers and databases, but I would support my colleagues, and the driving license in Ukraine is an identification card of a person, and bringing it to compliance will increase safety of this document. And any citizen in Ukraine has complaints to performance of the service centers issuing documents, but anyway, we should start. I'm very glad that the representatives of the Ministry of Interior are ready to use progressive approach and take even more obligations, and on our side we may guarantee that we will ensure their complementarity when they will be coordinated with the government and submitted for consideration of the Parliament when the government wants to implement even more than prescribed by the directive is a progressive situation. A chip may make driving licenses more expensive. This is our personal standard. The norm on chip is not mandatory. And what is your opinion? Well, we have some time for questions. Do you have questions? Speakers are ready to answer. Dear colleagues, please ask your question.
Austrian TV in Ukraine. I have two questions. First, who will pay for medical examination if you do not have obligatory medical insurance that we have in Austria? And countries I know where the system is non-existent, and also in Austria and in the Balkans we have private auto schools what system do you have? And if we say about corruption in the Baltics, they can easily buy this. And how are you going to regulate this training at the level of state in Ukraine? Okay, so Yuri Chorny will tell us about medical sphere, about driving schools. We have private driving schools. There are some state institutions that are coordinated by the Ministry of Education. This is first. So here there can be corruption. What about so we do not control private schools. We have a moratorium on verifications. A decision was taken that we should not control business, that business should control itself and improve itself. That's first. Second, about the activity of training centers. Unfortunately, we have cases of corruption, and it has a form of triangle. An interested citizen who wants to get document in a legal way, and auto school is also interested to get money, and the state do not control this, so people just buy some diplomas and that formally show their education. So we have ban on moratorium, we have only monitoring, and the corruption should not be supported, and we should prevent corruption, and we have a representative of Together Against Corruption initiative, and we work on the initiatives together with them, and we have a new system of tests, and we will introduce photo and video recording of a practical and theoretical part of test. There will be special video recording in the car, and based on the results of the tests, we will revoke the licenses of the instructors who allowed unprepared people to pass tests. So we all went to auto schools. We all know about stress, but it cannot be 90 or 95%. So there is some limit to it. This is about training of drivers. Also, we will support any initiatives by the Ministry of Education if they introduce the process of attestation and attestation of instructors in auto schools, because this is absent now in Ukraine, and the teacher gets the status. They do not have refresher training, and they do not know about novelties in legislation. We do not know how they organize the training. That's why we get this terrible statistics we voiced before. Corruption is when a citizen works or needs something from the state, and auto schools, their work ends at the level of issuance of certificate. And the problem of auto schools is not that there is corruption, but this business, the conditions, they do not stimulate competition and development of this business. In order to open and support this business, you should work with 4 ministries and confirm even those things that do not need confirmation. So to confirm certificates of teachers, vehicles, agreements. So there is a lot of work involved, and this is the matter not of corruption, and our obligations in the framework of the agreement will help us build better system, more attractive, in order that this business develop. Victor wants to leave. I would like to comment. I disagree. Now, together with NGOs, we worked on liberalization, and now all those schools will get the license, and we won't stop business. We will bring to responsibility the teachers, because we have terrible statistics when one person teaches in several oblasts at the same time, and some cars are used 24 hours. So this training and retraining for drivers, this is 15,000 hryvnias. They just can register this auto school and work. And in Europe, this is a business that needs a lot of investment. You should first invest in the business. And here we have it at the level of some sort of kiosk in the street. So you can form this business just in days. So about medical examination. This is a medical service, and drivers should pay for this. But when system is changed and there will be insurance, it will simplify payments. But about professional drivers, I believe that companies that hire those professional drivers, they will be interested to compensate those expenses. So many of companies are ready for this. Do you have other questions? Please introduce yourself first. Thank you. Katerina Kulchitska, Europe Without Barriers NGO. About microchip. We have reforms of ID documents. In our ID cards we have microchips, but unfortunately not in all institutions we have proper equipment in order to read this card, and many centers of administrative services and other institutions are not equipped with the proper equipment to read this information. So maybe some equipment should be bought to all police departments and other bodies that will check these documents, because we can create a progressive system, but then it will be difficult to use it. So about the probability of the use of these microchips in Ukraine, I am always surprised, because we create software for foreign companies, but we do not use our own know-hows. In foreign countries, there are multi-chip cards. You can verify data, and you can pay using this card, and we are lagging behind, and we continue to ask whether it is necessary. Now we have provision of the Cabinet of Ministers number 606, and this envisages the sharing of the data between the governmental bodies, and migration service will be included in the system, and we work to connect to this register, and there won't be any problems to check the data, and it opens big opportunities for people. So you can replace driving license electronically, and you can do it electronically. And about equipment for reading those microchips, they are not costly, and this technology can be provided to governmental bodies. Now, citizens of Ukraine have also a certificate that is printed from this chip, and there is an information about place of registration and maybe marital status. But I'm speaking about whether this chip will be used. I believe this is progressive thing. Maybe we will be able to speak about this after our press conference. Yes, this is a simple and clear technology, and these technologies are made in Ukraine about place of residence. People have certificate about it, but the chip will contain this information. We can model a situation where you come to some governmental body and the personnel they do not need to identify and check this information manually and to spend time on this. They just read this information from the chip and they see it on the screen. And then there is a visual check, and you will be provided with a service depending on the body you address to. And at the National Police, they will have such equipment. For example, Dachau was then a police officer stopped a car, and we just speak about other technologies, innovations police officers should work with. So there are no direct obligations in the directive, but we, as society, as citizens, we want to move forward and to have useful instruments and to get services in an easier and in an easier way. So an officer of patrol police will have equipment to read this information from the chip. So I'm not responsible for national police and their procurement. I cannot provide this information. About service centers, yes, we are ready for this. Yes, we are satisfied with answers. So there are no other questions. I would like to thank the speakers. I see that this topic of a chip was really a key to this discussion. So we are ready to provide analytical and expert support to state bodies. If you have such a request, we are ready. And if we disagree, I believe that this is a discussion. But we all have a single goal to harmonize our legislation and to increase safety on our roads.